Hi, Sue Gray, lawyer from Nelson here, and last night I wrote a letter to the Prime Minister and to the various ministers of COVID, the Attorney General who's responsible for the law in New Zealand, and other people from the key government positions. And I wrote it because I was extremely concerned about some of the research I'd done on the COVID vaccine. Now, we've been told it's safe and effective, it's approved by MedSafe and all sorts of different stories. But that is not true. When you really look into it, the approval from MedSafe was just a provisional consent under Section 23, bracket 1 of the Medicines Act. And that means it can only be used in a restricted way for a limited number of persons, a limited number of patients. Now, we've been told by the government that they've got these great plans to vaccinate all of New Zealand, and they've given us their timeline, their schedule of different groups get vaccinated at different dates. Vaccinating all of New Zealand is not what was intended for a provisional consent under the Medicines Act. It is not the treatment of a limited number of people. And this isn't just a pedantic legal argument, it's actually really important. The Medicines Act is the way New Zealand controls the safety of medicines and new substances. And it's the reason, for example, why medicinal cannabis is so difficult to access, because the hurdles have been so hard to get through that none of our local cannabis and hemp growers have been able to meet all the thresholds. And yet, on the other hand, here we have an experimental vaccine that's gone very, very limited safety testing. It's only just started. They've hardly looked at any of the medium or longer term results because it's impossible. It hasn't been used for that long. And they're proposing to take a shortcut through the processing and allow or encourage all of New Zealand to be vaccinated. So I wrote to the Prime Minister to point out that the law has been breached, and it's her government that has breached the law. And that is really serious, because there's a principle called the rule of law. If the government must obey the law, and if the government doesn't obey the law, how can they expect anybody else to obey the law? So it's super important that the law is obeyed, and all of the checks and balances, all of the safety mechanisms in the law, written into the Medicines Act, so that people who use a medicine can be confident that it has been safety checked, and it's gone through all these clinical trials. So it's a very different thing than what the government's been telling us. They've been telling us this sort of PR spin line, it's safe and effective. When you actually look into it, it isn't safe and effective, and it hasn't been approved by MedSafe. It, like I said, only has this very provisional approval. Now it gets worse, because when you look at what happened at MedSafe, it went to the expert committee, and it went into the committee with a recommendation that it be given a prescription-only status. Somehow, when it came out of that committee, that prescription-only status disappeared. Now, I don't know if that was a mistake or that was deliberate, but that's one of the questions I've asked the government. And it's really important, because most vaccines are prescription only. It means that you can get them from a doctor or a trained nurse, but you can't get them without medical overview, because vaccines kill people. And mostly, obviously, intended to be good, but sometimes it goes wrong. People have bad side effects, anaphylactic shock. If you're pregnant, it's difficult. All sorts of reasons why you need medical overview, and all sorts of reasons why the standard procedure is to give a vaccine medical approval by MedSafe, but only on a prescription-only basis. Now, why is this one not prescription only? It's a big problem, because it means that these vaccinators who have had just a couple of hours training course can inject people. The vaccinators don't necessarily have any medical training at all. I've asked for, under the Official Information Act, the information about what they learn, and it's mostly just, you know, how to open the box and how to thaw it out and how to throw the rubbish away, and a little bit about the politics of COVID. Very little about the actual medical risks, the ingredients, the side effects, very, very little about those things. And so what it means is because they've missed this prescription only restriction that was intended when it went into the process, they've missed it. It means that we now have vaccinators all over the country who aren't medically trained, injecting people with an experimental vaccine that hasn't gone through all of the safety and efficacy testing. You might wonder where I get my information. Well, surprisingly enough, most of the information comes from the government. The Gazette notice is published on the government website, and it's all there for anyone to search for. If you go onto the MedSafe website, you can find it. You can find the minutes of the meetings on there. You can find the data safety sheet, which explains what hasn't been tested. You can go on to the US clinical trials website and see the stage of the testing, and you'll see that this testing, the normal safety and efficiency testing for COVID, this COVID vaccine, Pfizer vaccine, is not due to complete until 2023. Some of the information is from the pharmaceutical company Pfizer themselves. It's their own information, and they're actually remarkably honest in some of it about what safety checks haven't been done and what steps need to be taken to ensure that people understand the risks. For some reason, the information that we're given in New Zealand under the safety data sheet is much less than the information that they're given in, say, America or the EU when they're given the vaccine. And that is a problem that I've identified. But there's nothing magic in the information here. It's all publicly available information, verifiable. A lot of it I will link, I'll give to the government if they can't find it themselves, but it's their very own information. My concern is that what they tell you in some of these newspaper adverts, you know, strength in numbers, how we're rolling it out, and, you know, it's safe, it's effective, and it's safe because it's been approved by our MedSafe experts, is actually not true when you read the fine print behind it. And so it's the inconsistencies between the spin and the reality where I've pulled this together from. So I've written to the Prime Minister, I've written to her team, I've given them an urgent deadline until 5 o'clock on Tuesday to answer whether they will pull this vaccine approval for now until all of the proper checks and balances and legal requirements are met, or if they're not prepared to do that, we're going to have to go to court and we're going to have to work out a timetable for getting this into court, because it's extremely important that the government follow the law, they follow the Medicines Act, they give the public honest information that's true and correct. If they say it's safe and effective, they need to back it up. What we've got at present is, if you read the fine print, it says something very different than the safe and effective claim. The fine print is so leaky, you could drive a bus through it. It's full of things that haven't been tested, that should be tested before it's rolled out to healthy people in the general population. So I'm hoping that I will hear back from the government today or Tuesday, and I'm hoping that they will agree that they need to act lawfully and that they will pull this vaccine until these tests have been met, and that they will correct the misleading and deceptive statements that they've made to the people of New Zealand, because people need to be able to trust our government. And I have reminded them, and I'll remind them again, that our government represent us. They represent the people of New Zealand. They don't represent the vaccine company or the people that fund the vaccines or other international agencies. They represent us, and their job is to make sure that government acts lawfully and that products that are approved under the medicines laws are properly approved and that they are fit for purpose, and that we, the people, are given all of the information we need to make informed decisions. So there's been a massive amount of work in this, and I do want to acknowledge amazing help from so many people. I started out by myself looking at all these issues during the COVID lockdown, and then on the COVID side and getting onto the vaccines. As things have gone on and I've become more public and what I've been finding, people have come and given me information that they've found. So I totally acknowledge Voices for Freedom, Claire Deeks and her team, and all of the amazing medical people that have given me information, all sorts of people all over New Zealand who are helping to pull this together, because we're up against a huge battle, really, whether we like it or not, if we want to preserve our freedoms, our traditional freedom of informed decision making, to choose or reject to take a medicine. We need to work together, and we need to stand very strong and very clear about what we expect from our Prime Minister and from our elected representatives and from our public servants, because I fear that they've forgotten. So this is a big test. I'll keep you posted when I hear back.